Today we take for granted the motorways, A-roads and city streets, over 2,000 miles of them that form the skeleton roadmap of Britain. And all because of the Romans, with their ingenuity and dogged determination to conquer everything in their path.
I'm Dan Jones, and I'm going to retrace the story of our Roman past along 6 of their most iconic roads.
Each road tells the story of our Roman legacy and its rich history. From their very first road across Kent, which powered their invasion, to the vital routes which helped them conquer most of Britain, before being beaten into retreat by the Scots. In nearly 400 years of occupation, the Romans changed Britain forever by bringing their armies, ideas, buildings, and religion.
But the Romans couldn't have done any of it without one thing: their roads.
Each Roman road tells a different story, and this one is about the end of Roman occupation in Britain.
This time I'm on Stane Street, which runs from London all the way down to the south coast. This is a road that'll take me from the dizzy heights of wealth in Roman Britain to the depths of its last days.
The Roman Empire stretched across Europe, and they defended it fiercely at every corner. But by the 4th century, they had mounting problems. They'd occupied our land for more than 300 years, but they were being increasingly attacked by forces within Britain. While on the continent, northern European tribes were threatening the Rhine border. The Roman Empire saw that area as a priority for defence, and to reinforce it they withdrew troops from our land. In the end, the very roads they'd built to help them rule Britain now became their escape routes.
I want to explore what happened when the Romans evacuated Britain, leaving it to be overrun by Anglo-Saxon tribes from modern Germany and Denmark. I'm hoping that a trip along Stane Street will give me an insight into the Romans' legacy in Britain.
Stane Street runs 67 miles from London to Chichester. The route is closely followed by our modern roads like the A3 and A24. This short, straight road from capital city to coast passes through lands that we would now recognise as the home counties of Surrey and Sussex. At one point they were the wealthiest and most Romanised areas in Britain, and now some of our most idyllic countryside. It's all a far cry from the transport hub at the top of this road.
Stane Street begins in a city that was founded by the Romans as Londinium, and which is Roman Britain's greatest legacy. It was a centrepiece of communication, and it helped shape the face of modern Britain. This is the Barbican, so named after the Roman fort that stood here.
London's fort was the home of the official guard of the governor of Britain, and would have housed around 1,000 men in a series of barrack blocks. It was built of Kentish ragstone, brought by boat along the Medway and Thames, and included bands of red tiles. But by the 4th century, this fort was under increasing threat. Britain's Roman rulers were struggling to defend themselves against internal rebellion and from constant incursions by barbarian tribes.
In 367 AD, Roman Britain fell victim to an event known as the Great Conspiracy. Bands of Scots and Picts and Saxons overran Hadrian's Wall and attacked positions on the east coast. Now, a general known as Theodosius was sent from the continent to deal with the problem, and it's telling that he came right here to Londinium. He probably did that because there was a very strong fort that he could use as a military base, and you can still see the remains of the northwestern walls of that fort right here.
With roads pointing in every direction from London, this fort was the key to securing the rest of the country. And in 367 AD, the Romans did just that.
The Romans continued to fortify London's walls right up until the end of the 4th century. In fact, these were some of the last building projects undertaken before they abandoned Britain entirely at the beginning of the 5th century. So in a sense, you can think of these walls as the Romans' architectural swan song.
The Romans may have quashed the Great Conspiracy of 367 AD, but the next 50 years witnessed chaos across Europe as barbarian tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals rebelled against the empire. Because of its strategic location on the River Thames, the Romans protected London. By river and road, it was their escape route back to mainland Europe.
Using the quickest means of communication, it was actually possible to get a message from here in London all the way to the city of Rome in just 9 days. Now, towards the end of the Roman Empire, when Britain was increasingly under attack, it became really important to get messages to the continent as quickly as possible.
With its straight route to the south coast, Stane Street was a vital link in that communication network. But where did it start? There's evidence near St Magnus the Martyr Church, on the north side of London Bridge.
If you're looking around London for signs of where Stane Street started, you won't have that much luck. But this piece of timber might just be a clue. This was found in the 1930s during excavations around the Thames, but it actually dates back to the 1st century AD, to the time just after the Romans had arrived in Britain. Now, it was probably from a wharf, from a structure at the side of the river, and actually where we're standing now, we're quite a long way back from the boundary of the modern Thames, and that really tells you just how much wider the River Thames was in Roman times. Now, as well as the river having changed shape over the years, London Bridge has moved around as well. The modern bridge is about 50 yards down in that direction, but it's quite probable that the old Roman bridge, the wooden structure, started somewhere around here, as did Stane Street. If I want to continue my journey along it, I've got to use what we now know as London Bridge.
The original Roman bridge was probably a military-style pontoon bridge, and it was a vital link on the direct overland route from East Anglia to Britain's southern ports.
People have been crossing the Thames using fords and causeways for thousands of years, but it was the Romans who were the first to have the technology to actually build a bridge to allow uninterrupted movement of people, animals and carts across the river.
By the 2nd century AD, Londinium was a thriving city with a population of around 60,000. A good many of them would have been crossing the bridge and using Stane Street. Evidence for that huge thoroughfare in Roman times is still being unearthed today. I've come to meet mudlarkers Ed and Monica.
How you doing? You all right? How you doing? So this is mudlarking. What's it all about?
So mudlarking is basically picking up London's history. So it's the tidal range of the Thames is 6 to 7 metres, and every time it comes up and goes down, it brings up more objects. And for us, it's salvaging, finding London's treasures that would be washed away and lost forever.
Now, I arrived and you just found a piece of Roman greyware.
Yep, it's a bit of cooking vessel. It's a tiny little shard, doesn't show much, but we know it's Roman.
How do you know it's Roman?
It's very, very thin. It's grey all the way through.
The profile?
Profile as well, the shape of it, if you look at the side of the pot. That's probably a small dish, serving dish.
How do you think this ended up here?
Basically, some Roman kitchen maid probably dropped it.
Dropped it.
Broke it.
That's it.
in the trash. Then another person comes and dumps it in the rubbish pile, which unfortunately is the Thames.
So should we see what we can find?
Yeah.
Good idea. Let's go.
So here you've got a lot of demolition rubble from all ages. As you can see, there's a lot of flints, there's tiles. Oh, this is interesting. So this is a little bit of Roman tegula roof tile.
How do you know that's Roman and that's not?
You can tell two ways, by the texture, by the profile. So this is the flange of a tegula tile, which would have been used on one of the Roman buildings in Londinium.
Yeah.
It's got the notch at the back, so this would have formed the bottom part of the tile and would have sat on a Roman roof in Londinium. Medieval tiles tend to be a lot thinner, and again the fabric is different. So that is Roman, and it's still in situ from when it was dumped in the Thames. So that's history in the making.
That's amazing, just there amongst all of this. You've got the eye for it. It's very impressive. There we go, we found something.
We have.
Mudlarkers like Ed and Monica have found thousands of objects on the Thames. Many of them tell us a lot more about Roman life near Stane Street than a simple roof tile can.
So this is an amazing array of stuff that you found on previous visits to the Thames. Tell me about some of it.
Ceramics are very common on the Thames and obviously get washed in, got thrown in Roman times. This is a flagon neck, and as you can see, it's still got the neck and the handle, and is astounding that it's survived in the river for nearly 1,800 years.
So how big do you think the original vessel would have been?
The original vessel would have stood roughly about that high. So as you can see, the profile is pretty good.
And do we know what it would have contained?
Probably wine. So again, the Romans, as we know, were great drinkers, and obviously would have been a vessel that would have been used throughout Londinium.
And what is this? Is this a little lamp or is it a little tiny teapot?
It's a little Roman oil lamp. It's probably 1st century. The style of it is particularly small, so it's an early copy of the Roman ones. It was made in London itself, probably by an Anglo-Roman factory. It's absolutely beautiful, practically complete. It would hold enough oil to basically burn for 2 to 3 hours. Oh. So that would just, you'd have your little servant going around lighting them all in the evening, and it would take you through to bedtime.
When London was abandoned by the Romans in the 5th century, the skills and the money to maintain the bridge were lost. It fell into disrepair and collapsed. The techniques to rebuild it didn't re-emerge for at least another 400 to 500 years. The bridge seems to have been rebuilt by the year 984 AD. Beyond London Bridge, Stane Street heads due south, passing Borough Market and Elephant and Castle towards Clapham.
I'm now about 2 miles from London Bridge in South London, and this is an absolutely classic example of how the Roman road network is still with us, just buried beneath modern roads and modern architecture. This is Clapham Road, the modern A3. And as you can see, it's wide, it's level, it's absolutely arrow straight. And we've got the Romans to thank for this, because this is Stane Street. And about 60 miles in that direction is the city of Chichester. That's where I'm going.
I'm travelling the length of Stane Street, the Roman road from London to Chichester, to find out what happened when the Romans abandoned Britain and the legacy they left behind. 25 miles south of the capital, the road follows the route of what is now the A3 and A24. The journey brings me close to the Surrey hills and the town of Dorking. The Romans may be long gone, but today Box Hill is still inhabited by examples of the wildlife they brought here. The largest land snails in Britain were introduced by the Romans, who wanted to eat them. Their shells thrive off the calcium in the chalk around this area, and they're a protected species in England. And snails weren't the only delicacy the Romans brought.
One of the goods the Romans imported to Britain in massive quantities was wine. And here today, just off Stane Street in the Surrey Hills, is somewhere where the legacy of Roman drinking habits still lives on.
This landscape, near where Stane Street crosses the River Mole, has been sculpted by the tradition of Roman viticulture, something we've all become rather fond of in the last 2,000 years. I'm meeting wine expert Paula Locke to find out more.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Nice to see you. So, Paula, the Romans were very famous for drinking wine. Did everyone drink wine, or was it just for posh people?
Everyone drank wine, so from emperor to slave, and even the Roman soldiers had wine as a ration. Wine was really the drink that all of the Romans drank, mainly because the water wasn't always very good. So wine was a lot safer.
So the alcohol helped to purify the water?
Exactly.
While most wine was imported from the continent, there's evidence the Romans produced it in our relatively chilly climate. They had a vineyard as far north as Northampton. Grapes were pressed and the juice boiled or baked to preserve it. As a sweetener, the Romans added honey and sometimes lead.
Well, all this talk of wine is making me thirsty, and we've got several bottles in front of us. What have we got all together?
Okay, this one is called conditum, and this is a spice wine.
And so, was that saffron?
Yeah, you got some saffron, some black pepper.
So I thought that might be sort of dirt, but actually,
No,
it's pepper.
Yeah, and it also had infused with a bay leaf and a date stone.
And was that a typical Roman recipe?
Yes, I mean all of these were fairly typical that I've done for you today.
Can I try some?
Please do.
Oh, that's really sweet. Really sweet.
Mm.
Woo! Oh,
quite lemony.
Quite tasty though, isn't it?
It is tasty, yeah, but you would have typically watered this down, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And were there particularly popular spice combinations in Condom?
Well, what I've done here is the classic, that we do actually have original recipes for that. And this particular drink was so popular, there was even a traveller's version. So if you were particularly picky about your mixture, you could mix up the spice element and the honey and take it along with you. And as you stopped off at an inn, you could just pour in your own spices.
Love it. Winemaking goes back thousands of years, but it was the ancient Greeks who refined the art. As Rome expanded and took over Greek settlements in southern Italy in the 3rd century BC, they adopted their winemaking traditions, as well as Dionysus, the god of wine, who the Romans called Bacchus. Okay, so what about this one, Rosata?
Well, amazingly enough, it's roses. So basically, you go and collect loads of rose petals from your garden and then sew them up into a linen bag and then infuse it into the white wine.
And my daughters make perfume by doing that, so similar principle, do they just like the flavour of roses?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. Is that... looks like a rose petal floating in it. Wow, it smells really perfumed.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's very nice, but it's like drinking liquid roses. Very sweet again. Wine was a precious commodity and needed careful transport and storage. Both the Romans and the Greeks used large ceramic jars called amphorae to hold their wine. Each holds the equivalent of around 35 bottles. And finally, what do we have?
So this is the passum. I'm not going to tell you what that's called in English, to see if you can work it out.
Okay. It smells almost like apples or pears.
Getting close.
Whoa, that's really sweet as well. What is it?
It's actually raisin wine.
Raisin wine?
Yeah. So it's semi-dried grapes they used, and then immerse into the wine and they pulp up, and then actually you swizz the wine about and the raisin juice goes into the wine.
So what are the main differences between wine in Roman times and wine today?
Basically because the Romans watered down their wine, so it was 1 part wine to 3 parts water, and it was always diluted. Otherwise it was considered uncivilised to drink it neat.
What did the Romans think about getting drunk?
Well, it was a definite no-no. The elite were very snooty about drunkenness, although it seems they probably did also overindulge sometimes. Bars, in Pompeii, for example, there's over 150 bars just in that small city, and they were always described as being quite riotous and drunkenness, brawls, that kind of thing. Women were supposedly not meant to drink either, or at least definitely not in excess, although they obviously did because wine was the drink. So it was the usual standards, really. You know, men, okay, women, no, not allowed to.
Sort of timeless, hypocritical attitudes towards drinking going on in Roman times.
Nothing changes, does it? Yeah. So.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Winemaking in Britain continued after the Romans departed, at least into the time of the Normans. More than 40 vineyards in England are mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086. And so it's back on the Roman roads south. This is the A29, or as it's known locally, Stane Street. Now, in the fields around here, there was once an old posting station known as Alfoldian, where travellers could change horses and rest before heading on down another 14 miles to another posting station known as Hardham. And that's where I'm headed now. The major roads in Roman Britain had stopping places at regular intervals, usually every 20 miles. These were often small garrisons called way forts. But if there were no soldiers in town, civilian buildings called posting stations served a similar purpose, a means of carrying messages quickly across the empire. My next stopping point on Stane Street is the spot where it crosses the River Arun in West Sussex. This village of Hardham was once the last staging post on Stane Street before you got to Chichester. So any messengers bringing urgent news down from London would have had to stop here. Now today, there's nothing left in the way of Roman buildings, but inside this little medieval church dedicated to St. Botolph, there are a few tantalising glimpses that remain into the Roman world. This ancient church contains some of the oldest wall paintings in Britain.
It's like a medieval art gallery.
The Reverend Peter Mallinson is vicar here.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
So, Peter, this is a lovely church, but it's not Roman, is it?
No, it's Saxon. Two-cell Saxon church, round about 1030 to 1050 built.
What's his Roman connection?
Round here there was a way fort on Stane Street, which was destroyed round about that time, and this is actually built out of the rubble from the way fort.
After the Romans left, their structures fell into disuse. It was common for the locals to cannibalise the stone. Masonry from the mighty Hadrian's Wall was used to build Hexham Abbey in Northumberland. Apart from showing me his church, built of Roman masonry, there's one fresco in particular Peter wants me to see.
There's another Roman connection, isn't there? Because we have St George on the wall.
We do have St George on the wall. This was originally St George's Church, they believe, not St Botolph's, and he was the patron saint of it. So the pictures here are very much dedicated to the life and work of St George.
According to some theories, England's patron saint was a member of an elite army unit, the Praetorian Guard, whose members were personal bodyguards for Roman emperors. He was beheaded due to his Christian beliefs and made a martyr.
Here we have not only a building that's made from Roman materials, but on its walls we also have a kind of a recycled Roman built into a medieval saint. Because here he is. What context do we see him on the frescoes?
We see him fighting with his staff. They call pikes, don't they? Drawn and fighting. And I'm not sure if he's fighting the dragons or fighting the infidel, as was said at that time.
And people still tell that story of St George, even though they might not know the details of who he was, where he came from. But they have that attachment.
They have that attachment to St George, which is understandable. Yeah. But I always like the thought that he's probably not an Englishman.
Eventually, Christianity became the official Roman faith. George was canonised by Pope Gelasius I and became England's patron saint in the 1340s.
What do these pictures of St George tell us? Are they telling us a story?
You have St George fighting the dragon, then you have St George being tortured by his torturers, and that one at the far end, you can see the brick arch, that's actually St George into his tomb. It tells the whole sequence of events of the life of St George.
And so in a way this building is designed to be read, seen
exactly the
like
same as stained glass. They're stories you told because you didn't read and write. The priest told the stories from the Bible on a Sunday, but actually the walls of the building tell the story far more eloquently than any priest ever could.
So for all of these generations and centuries of ordinary people who weren't taught to read and write, they'd still know these martyrdom stories and these stories that came from Roman Britain.
Oh yes, because here they are.
The Romans ruled Britain for nearly 400 years, but in the early 5th century they withdrew to defend other parts of their empire, as barbarian tribes ran amok in northern Europe. Britain was soon invaded by the Saxons, who came from territories we now know as northern Germany. My journey along Stane Street has plenty to reveal about the last years of our Roman occupation. I'm well into the last quarter of the journey, at least 60 miles from London and not far from Chichester.
For 3 centuries, the south of Britain, which Stane Street cuts through, was the province's richest and most Romanised region. Here, among the fertile agricultural lands of what's now Sussex, prosperous landowners built luxurious, sprawling villas to show off their wealth.
Just off Stane Street lies Bignor Villa, discovered by a farmer in 1811 when his plough hit a large stone. Opened to the public for the first time in 1814, the site was one of Britain's earliest tourist attractions. It has stayed in the ownership of the same family, the Tuppers, to this day. I'm meeting Dr. Miles Russell, an archaeologist who has examined the findings made at Bignor.
So Miles, where was Stane Street?
So Stane Street's just running in front of us here. It goes down just in front of the downs and then goes up as sort of this zigzag path up to the top of the chalk.
So this is a pretty good place to put a villa.
Oh, it's absolutely ideal, yes.
And then access, I suppose, to Chichester over there and London over there.
Yeah, exactly, down to the main markets, up to London and the harbours beyond.
Pretty nice spot. Shall we go and have a look?
Let's do that.
Bignor Villa has some of the finest mosaics in Britain and the longest continuously exposed one in Europe at 24 metres.
So Miles, we're standing before this amazing mosaic. What was it once part of?
This is part of the north wing of the villa, so this is the main domestic range. This is where we're going to get the dining room, the entertainment space, and also the main sort of business part of the villa. So where everything's going on in the villa, it's in this part of it.
The owners left with the rest of the Romans. It seems their haste may have been the cause of the villa's preservation.
This sort of quality of mosaic is relatively rare survival-wise. We're fortunate that this particular site was discovered in 1811, at a time before there was deep ploughing or intensive agricultural activity across the South Downs. So the preservation here is really thanks to the fact it hadn't been disturbed by ploughing. It also, as far as we can see at the end of the Roman period, was abandoned relatively quickly. So it was forgotten about, and a number of villas were cannibalised, the material ripped out and used for other buildings. It's abandoned and it's laying quiet underneath the turf for thousands of years.
What was this villa once like, and what sort of people built a villa like this? Do we know who built it?
We don't know who built it, but we can say that right at the very end of Roman Britain, around about 340 AD, someone comes here with a vast amount of money and they're spending it in an extremely lavish way.
Where would you get that kind of money in late Roman Britain?
I think whoever's coming here is coming from another part of the empire, because I think when you look at a lot of areas of this part of the world in Sussex and Hampshire, suddenly there's a huge influx of cash, and we're not really seeing it anywhere else in southern Britain. I think it might actually be possibly from Gaul or from another part of the Western Empire.
What would it have been like for ordinary Britons to see a place like this go up in their midst? I mean, would there have been any benefit for them?
Britons might be working here on the farm as labourers, they might be perhaps participating in some kind of trade here, but they're not living in this house, they're not benefiting from it, they're not really becoming Roman.
Let's talk about the detail of some of these mosaics. We can see all these geometric designs here, but there are figurative designs elsewhere in the villa.
Yes, there are. I think the thing is about being a Roman here, it's all about showing off, showing your wealth, but also showing how integrated you are into Roman society. So you're showing scenes from Roman mythology. So we've got a fantastic mosaic over there that shows a scene of Jupiter in the guise of an eagle abducting Ganymede, the shepherd boy, for his own nefarious purposes. And then you've got a series of dancing girls around the outside and an ornamental fountain.
The Romans didn't invent mosaics, they took the idea from the Greeks and expanded on it. The designs are often geometric, but from the 1st century AD they became more sophisticated. They often show religious stories, scenes from myth, and lots of animals, both real and legendary.
When the Romans left Britain, what happened to this villa?
I think the key thing to think about this villa is its big lifespan. The luxury that we can see here is very short-lived. So at 340 AD, these floors are being laid. By 380, it's gone. So it's got a lifespan of about 40 years. I think it's coming at just a point where the economy is starting to collapse, where you've got rebellion, where you've got invasion, and you just don't have the kind of finances to sustain this kind of luxury living. And the countryside is also becoming increasingly an unsafe place to live. You're sort of sitting there, look at me, I'm rich, attack me.
Yes.
So I think this villa, the roof collapses onto the floor. We've got areas where large roof tiles have come down and gone straight through the floor. It's been abandoned. It hasn't been used. The stonework hasn't been ripped up and cannibalised. So I think it's just abandoned fairly swiftly and forgotten.
Why was this particular part of the province so vulnerable to attacks?
If we talk about the Saxons migrating down through the English Channel, they're a bit like the Vikings in a much later period. It's nighttime attacks, sudden attacks on very wealthy targets, getting loot, getting prisoners and out. So all the coastal villas are burning down. This one's a bit protected because it's the other side of the downs, but increasingly it's an obvious target and there's no defences here. So this villa is coming into its wealth and status at just the wrong time, at a point where it's becoming very, very dangerous to be a rich person in this part of the territory.
So when this part of the world became vulnerable, where did people typically go?
If you've got ties here, family here, and want to stay, then you need to be somewhere more secure. And that might be inside a town, it might be moving further westwards where you've got less invasion, less sort of rebellion going on. Or you might eventually decide to cross the channel and just go. But you're taking your wealth and status with you. But certainly after the Roman administration breaks down, actually the way of life is improving, standards of life gets better and life expectancy improves. So ironically, I guess when we think about the end of Roman Britain, life for the Britons improves once Rome has gone.
With the Romans gone, native Britons no longer had to pay tax to the empire, so they were probably able to buy better food, and some historians think this would have added a few years to their life expectancy. Male Britons might have lived to be 44 and women 35. From Bignor, Stane Street climbs the escarpment of the South Downs, continuing as an agger, an ancient Roman embankment across the steep hillside.
Most people think that the Romans' most visible legacy in Britain today is their arrow straight roads, just like this section of Stane Street. But do the Romans deserve all the credit?
I'm meeting Dr. Steve Willis from the University of Kent, who's an expert on the ancient Celts.
Steve, the Romans get all the credit for the roads we see all across Britain even today, but do they deserve it?
They deserve it to a considerable degree. They had an imperial project to roll out their imperial policy across Britain. They needed to get their army where they needed to be fast. They needed to move economic goods around. So many of those roads are straight, but then in the Iron Age, many of these centres existed before the Romans, and they would have followed the natural grain of the land. Now, in many instances, that's what the Romans do too. And a lot of that is formalised in the Roman period.
So is it more the case then that the Romans brought the hard engineering rather than the routes themselves?
They bring hard resources, robust resources for road metalling, surfacing with flagstones, gravel, all these layers that go to make up a road like this.
In the Roman period, we see straight lines all over the landscape. But why did the Romans build so straight?
We've got to remember that the Romans had an imperial policy. They tended to overbuild things. It was part of their mindset, and then they were stuck with it. But it's also about economy, because if you're moving things and people on roads, it's about 20 times more expensive than moving them by water. By the time you've loaded up your cart and you've got your oxen and your horses, you want to make that journey as swiftly as possible, because the profit you'll make will be going down because you've got to feed your animals, you've got to rest them, you've got to water them, you might have to stay overnight. So the quicker you can make this journey with your heavy resources from A to B, the better it will be. Stane Street, which we're on today, there isn't much in the way of any signs of there being prehistoric or Iron Age activity below. So it seems to be a new road linking Chichester with a new foundation at London and crossing the wild woodlands of Sussex and Surrey.
So typically for the Romans, they seem to have taken what was already there, improved it and Romanised it. In this case, the ancient routes that crisscrossed Britain. This 2-kilometre stretch of Stane Street passes through Eartham Woods, part of the Slindon and Eartham estates. This section is also known as Monarch's Way, as it was part of the route that the future King Charles II used when he fled England for his life after the Battle of Worcester in 1651.
From here you can actually see the spire of Chichester Cathedral. Now in Roman times, Chichester was an important fort and industrial town called Novio Majus Reginorum. And Stane Street makes a beeline straight for it, so I'm going to follow suit.
Novio Majus Reginorum was first established as a winter fort in 43 AD, not long after the initial Roman invasion of Britain. The town first rose to prominence due to its natural harbour, which still exists 2 miles to the southwest, though it was much closer in Roman times.
After a journey of around 60 miles from London Bridge, travellers along Stane Street would eventually arrive in Chichester here on the East Gate.
It's 1800 years since the walls and gates were first built. Today they make up the most intact circuit of Roman town defences in southern England. More than 80% of the original structure has withstood the test of time. The original Roman wall was 2 metres thick and had a deep ditch. It was modified in the Middle Ages and again in the Georgian era. Its sheer size demonstrates not only the wealth of the region, but perhaps also the Romans' anxiety about invasion.
This stone was carved during the 1st century of Roman occupation of Britain, and it harks back to a time when a native British king called Cogidubnus dedicated a temple to the Roman gods Neptune and Minerva. And that's really important because it tells us something crucial about the way the Romans occupied Sussex and the rest of Britain. It wasn't just about violent conquest. Alliances with native rulers like Cogidubnus were just as important. In fact, without those alliances, you could say that none of the settlements that thrived up and down Stane Street would have survived anywhere near as long as they did.
Chichester's amphitheatre and baths suggest a thriving Roman city. But by the 4th century, Roman archaeological finds start to dry up, and there's a reason for this.
By the 360s, Chichester really needed its defensive walls. Roman Britain was under regular attack from bands of Saxons, Picts and Scots. With hindsight, this was the beginning of the end, although it was an end that took a long time to arrive.
My journey along Stane Street has taken me on a truly historic route. From the heart of the capital, I've crossed London Bridge, traversed the agricultural lands farmed by wealthy Romans and Britons, and seen the city walls and east gate of Chichester. But my mission to find out how and why the Romans abandoned our islands isn't over yet. Just a few miles further west of Stane Street on the south coast lies a spectacular fortress.
I'm at one of the last great building projects in Roman Britain. It's not a luxurious palace or a villa, but a defensive fort. Once maybe known as Portus Aderni, today it's Porchester Castle. It was built with the latest military technology, and today it's the best preserved Roman fort north of the Alps.
Porchester Castle was one of the series of coastal defences now known as the Forts of the Saxon Shore, stretching around the south and east coasts. The forts were built over the course of the 3rd century to meet the threat presented by Saxon pirates who were raiding the south coast of Roman Britain. This chain of 9 great defences stretched from present-day Brancaster in Norfolk to Richborough on the Thames estuary and from Dover in Kent right round to Porchester. This is where I'm meeting historian Paul Pattinson to learn about their fascinating history.
We look around here, and although people will immediately focus on a medieval castle, you don't have to look very far to see Roman walls. There is this sense that we are living on top of Roman Britain, right?
I think that's absolutely right. Most of our major towns and cities, a huge part of our road network, it's all from the Roman period. So you could argue that the topography that we have inherited is Roman in origin.
Why did the Romans choose to put a fortification right here?
I think it's to do with the way that materials are moving in and out of the province to serve the Roman army. So, for instance, they need a lot of grain. Britain is known as a big grain store for the Roman army. They're exporting a lot of minerals that are coming from the West Country, for instance. And so I think all of these shore forts that are built in the 3rd and 4th century are to do with that.
Let's talk about the fabric of the building. How do we know that this was originally Roman?
We know it's Roman from the things that are found here, and it also follows, a conventional pattern for Roman forts being built at that time. But also there are some documentary references from Roman writers in the 4th and 5th centuries that mention several places along the British coast. Porchester could be one of them.
Do we have any idea of how many people were here, what kind of people were here?
From the character of the finds that came from the excavations, it's not purely military. The finds were of a character which suggests that families were here, so there were women and children here. So there are mercantile things going on here. We know they're making things here. They're making things out of antler and bone. They're weaving. There's metalworking going on. So it's more of a little town, really, with a fortification around it, and presumably a garrison.
So we get towards the second half of the 4th century and we see an increase in attacks on Roman Britain from people outside Roman Britain. What was happening?
Well, the Great Conspiracy is a good point to start. 367 AD, there's this massive, apparently collaboration between a number of peoples on the fringes of the Roman Empire. Actually, a lot of them, as far as Britain's concerned, are from its northern and western region. So we've got the Picts, the Caledons, the Scots, including some Irish raiders as well. On 2 occasions, we get major Roman generals, Theodosius and then Stilicho, towards the very end of the 4th century, who have to bring armies across here to put things right.
So what was the real moment of crisis for Roman Britain?
It's a mounting crisis. Troops are successively withdrawn to try and save the rest of the Western Roman Empire. And the crunch actually comes in 406, when a number of tribes from across the Rhine, when the Rhine freezes over in a particularly severe winter, sweep into Gaul and they overrun Gaul. And from that moment on, Britain is effectively cut off from communications with the rest of the empire. So you can say that by 411, Britain is no longer a Roman province.
As the Romans were withdrawing from Britain, and specifically from around here, what do you think it must have been like for ordinary people?
Well, you can imagine what it's like in a situation where society is breaking down, where you no longer have enough soldiers to protect you, where the civil administration is breaking down, where there's a shortage of money, and where ships might appear in the estuary at any time. It could have been pretty terrifying, actually. And, people probably did suffer, I would imagine. But part of me also thinks that, people do survive, don't they? And even raiders need people to farm and to make things. So, yes, there would have been some terrifying times, but, people survived, did they not?
I suppose in a way, no matter how sophisticated the Romans were compared to civilizations before them, I guess their great achievement was their engineering. What they did, for better or worse, really lasted and it's still here with us today.
That's it. I mean, it's the bones of the country, if you like.
In 406 AD, the Roman Empire was itself invaded by Germanic tribes from the north. Troops from across the empire, including Britain, were called back to defend the homeland. By around 407 AD, the last contingents of the Roman army had left Britain. With no Roman administration to maintain order or soldiers to defend it, the Roman way of life fell under attack, both from the tribes within Britain and the Saxons arriving from northern Europe. Roman rule in Britain was over. Stane Street has taken me from the heights of Britain's Roman splendour to the chaos of the imperial retreat after nearly 400 years. And Stane Street is just one of the great Roman roads that I've travelled over these last few weeks. A journey across Britain of just under 1,000 miles. I've seen how the roads helped the Romans conquer Britain by carrying their armies, but then paved the way for the creation of towns and cities, the introduction of new religions and pastimes, the building of Roman Britain. And Rome's legacy lives on with us today, from these inspiring buildings to the culture and of course the incredible road network that has been my pleasure to walk along.